Farrah, thank you for taking some time to meet with me, and thank you for what you do in our community. Would you take a minute, kind of introduce yourself for us?
Sure. So I'm Fair Neighbors Waggoner, a native of this area. I have lived here my whole life except for a little bit of time off with college, traveled around, and then I came back and started in banking 20-something years ago, which is kind of amazing. Started at the ground up and learned about every facet of banking you can imagine. Joined United Community Bank 15 years ago as their city president and commercial lender here in Henderson County, and I've loved it ever since.
You mentioned the SBA. Talk a little bit about how the SBA fits into this picture. What's that like? Do they lend the money? Do you lend the money? Are they a partner with you in lending the money? And well, what's that really look like?
So SBA, especially with United, is a pretty big partner. We're a significant SBA lender, and what I love about the way we focus with SBA is, again, usually the pathway will start with me. Sometimes we can offer a conventional and an SBA option, so it doesn't always have to be one or the other. But in most cases, if it's a brand new business entity, a new idea, then we actually just connect with our SBA representative here in the bank. We walk them through the lending, and at the end of the day, the bank will still hold the note or the paper. The SBA guarantees up to 75% of that note. And that's where an SBA loan gives a bank an ability to do a loan that maybe they can feel passionate about and they can see that it's a good opportunity. But again, with banking, it's got to be less about passion and more about I've got to be able to prove it with numbers, assets, a business plan, something like that.
So you mentioned something about the SBA. What is the SBA? Who is that group?
So Small Business Association. Yes.
Administration.
Small Business Administration, that has for years and years kind of served as a conduit for the government to help fund entrepreneurs, new business, expanding businesses. So, the FDIC monitors banks closely to make sure they are following all the rules of lending, right? And if it ain't written, it ain't real. It's proven information. So what the SBA does is it does help kind of with the American spirit. It says, hey, here's what I want to do, and ensures that you've done your research, that you've found the appropriate business or loan or need. But then their guarantee helps a bank become more comfortable with assisting with that financing progress.
Because banks don't want to lose the money that they've loaned, and the SBA stands with you as a partner in that relationship.
That's right.
Yeah, I've used the SBA in some of my experience, and I know that you've done a fair amount of that here. Once the relationship gets up and going, is the SBA still involved? Do they work with you, or is that behind the scenes more?
So yeah, the SBA, it depends on kind of the loan size and what the project is. But for the most part, I mean, we work, even when SBA is the one who guarantees the loan, it still is a bank loan. And so I continually work in tandem with whoever it is that I assist with that SBA financing. And then as time goes on, there becomes a point where they become historic and provable, right? Typically that's the 2 to 3 year mark where there are financials that prove that what they have envisioned and planned has come to fruition. Then all of a sudden it makes them perhaps a different candidate to refinance with a bank loan or a bank opportunity. But I will tell you, on the front end, the SBA not only looks at maybe the loan need, they help look at things like a working line of credit, to help with the capital needs. Because that first 2 years in business, even people with the greatest of plans, they cannot foresee everything.
Right.
So the SBA is such a critical piece up front, but the bank works in tandem with them and administers things as it goes through the process.
So what is the difference between a line of credit and that loan that they might get on the front end? How are those different?
So to me, yeah, very different. The term loan is what you know you have to spend, and you start making payments on that immediately, fully amortizing principal and interest payments. A line of credit it's the what if. And the great thing about a line of credit is you use it and pay it back. and you only pay interest on the portion of the line that you've used. So if the SBA or the bank or whomever grants you a line of credit, you're not actually paying the full payment on it, and you may never even need to access it, but it's an amazing buffer safety net to have in place.
It's there if you need it.
It's there if you need it. And the hard thing is if you go to a bank and you're to a point where you need the line of credit, sometimes it's tougher to approve something at that point. So that's really a smart part of a business plan or being proactive, is to try to have some sort of line of credit available to you and in place, whether it's to seize an opportunity, to replace something unexpected. Yeah.
And when we think of borrowing big amounts of money, it's a house. And it's a 30-year loan. That's not how business loans work. What's the time frame typically, or what is the possible range for time frame?
Well, and so I'll give you both avenues. So in my world, which is more conventional finance, typically you have a 15-year amortization is what we underwrite to. Sometimes we'll stretch that to a 20 or a 25-year, but when it's a business, 15 years, and that's real estate. If it's equipment, a lot of times the term is going to be based on the life of the equipment. So with some equipment, it could have a life of 5 years. Some could have, and then additionally, there's typically a balloon or a call period in that note. So it could be a 3-year, a 5-year. And what that is just an opportunity for the bank to meet with the customer. Have they paid as agreed? Is business what it is? And then they talk about the market rates that day, and they reset the balloon for another period.
Okay.
Another perk of SBA, which can help with kind of that cash flow financing piece, is they can stretch up to 30 years in some cases, depending upon the collateral. And so, whereas my payment's going to be a little steeper because it's a shorter amortization, SBA, but, again, rate differential can factor into that. Most SBA loans are floating rates, and will adjust with whatever Prime's doing. And in conventional, we can do floating or fixed, and a lot of people prefer that fixed rate option just so they know what their payment's going to be.
Okay. Can you explain how banks in particular look at entrepreneurial possible clients and just that whole concept of loaning money to somebody that's a startup?
Yeah, sure. So personally, I'm always excited at the opportunity of somebody who has the gusto to, create something new or head down a new path. I would think in banking in general, it's so conventional banking and conventional lending really requires on history. So when you come to a bank and you have a new opportunity or a new idea, sometimes we have to look at either facets of what you're currently doing or current assets to be able to help us help you with those new opportunities, or we need to really, consider other options that SBA or potential future lending options that can focus more on concept versus reality. So in conventional lending, history is important, tangible numbers are important. And then, so what I would tell anybody who was looking at something like that is put together a plan, like a really good plan, and then meet with someone like me. And typically what I do is direct. So do we go down the conventional path, or do we seek alternative financing?
Now, let's say we've got that loan set up between us, and I'm the borrower, and we know who the lender is in this case. What's the relationship like between us after that loan's been made? How often do we meet? What are those meetings like?
Yeah.
What do I have to do to get ready for that conversation?
Well, so I will say this is where banks are different, maybe. So we're considered a regional bank, and for us, our focus is community and connection and relationships. So usually, and hopefully in all cases, when we do a loan for somebody, we become their banker, right? And we meet with them at least annually, depending upon the amount of money. But when it comes to their accounts, how they receive and send payments, how they pay their payroll, those are all things that we try to help, kind of guide our customers with. I would say, you should know your banker's name and number. That's kind of the relationship I would think that most businesses would want to have, the ability to contact them when they need them.
Are there particular people or information sources that you would recommend for an entrepreneur to read, to listen, to watch? Nowadays, there's so many sources of information to stay up on all things small business borrowing.
So, well, it's funny that you're asking me that, because usually Blue Ridge is where I send a significant amount of folks. Mountain BizWorks, another great resource. And then industry specific, in this day and age, if you are wanting to open, a mechanics shop, you can very specifically research that and use that kind of industry information to build your business plan. Local Chamber of Commerce, another great resource as far as learning what is active in the type of business that you're wanting to run here in Hendersonville. And just depending upon what it is, I would think that resources would be almost unlimited as far as what you can access online. But I think for me, the biggest thing, especially if it's a new business and if it's a new concept to someone, really having a solid business plan, or at least the framework of one, is what you kind of need before you go to the step of a bank. It's we certainly want to try to discuss ideas and opportunities with anyone, but it does have to be vetted and realistic, and maybe you've at least put the legwork in to kind of hammer it out a little bit to know what you're looking for.
And for a potential entrepreneur, and they're getting to that point where that business plan is about ready to be put out there, would you recommend they come to a bank first, or would you recommend they talk to somebody about their possibilities? Because we know there's a number of different potential lenders.
Sure.
I remember in my history, I had someone say, the bank is the gold standard. If you can get your funding from a bank, that's a great place to really go. But not everybody can get there, and not everybody, when they get there, are really bankable in the true sense. How do you view that for the entrepreneur? Should they come to the bank first? Should they do something different before they come to the bank? Or what would you recommend for a process of getting started?
Yeah, I would think when it comes to like developing the idea and the plan, then the resources we discussed would be fantastic. Maybe it's because I'm a banker, but I think most people would agree, if you can get a bank loan, that's probably your best bet. And then the good opportunity that a bank also offers, like I said, is our partnership with SBA, our direct connections with the Small Business Center and other areas. If we don't see it as an immediately conventionally bankable loan, then usually we can at least help you find the right path, right? Take a next step. And when I say the business plan needs to be solid, it needs to be solid in that it is thought out. And then we can help guide you on what potential loan framework might look like, when you're filling out your cash flow numbers and things like that. So you don't necessarily we don't expect you to know that going into it. That's when maybe a midpoint conversation just to say, this is what my plan is. And then, we're always happy to help you figure out that next best step.
I know you've done this for a while, and I know you've done it in this area for quite a while. Would you have any other words of advice or recommendations for somebody that's considering this pathway as a career or something they'd like to make a run at? Is there anything that you would want to add that we haven't talked about so far?
I feel like you've covered a lot, and I feel like I am an optimistic banker, which is I want to find ways to make things work, and so I always work in that direction. But if I've learned one thing, it is to always think about worst case scenario. And so you plan for the best, but then you always know what it is, and then hopefully whatever plan we make will always cover whatever potential negative thing that impacts your business. So I think when you sit down and kind of start making your plan and doing projections, we want best case scenario, but then you also need to be as kind of your harshest critic and say, here's what if everything goes wrong?
Yeah.
How am I going to sustain? And then those are the businesses that when there is a economic hiccup or a supply chain issue, those are the businesses that seem to have more capacity to maintain for the long term.